Hi, I'm Dr. Kurt Wohler for Sunrise Functional Medicine. This is part two of a video discussion on a specific organic acid test that comes from a special needs child. And this particular organic acid test, if you watch part one, has a lot of fungal markers, bacterial markers, high oxalate, for example. And then in this video, we're going to talk about some of the mitochondrial markers that are high and some other imbalances. So here is the disclaimer for this information, understanding that this is for educational purposes only. So the organic acid test from Mosaic Diagnostics has a lot of information. This is a very comprehensive organic acid test, highly important for individuals with chronic health issues. That could be autistic children, that could be special needs children, others with chronic fatigue or neurological problems, wide variety of issues. So very important test to have done. And one of the places you can access this test is through Lab Test Plus, which is a website that provides access to various lab companies providing functional and integrated medicine testing, including the organic acids test from Mosaic Diagnostics. So for more information about Lab Test Plus, the test offered, you can go to the website. You can also email Lab Test Plus at labtestplus@gmail.com. So in part one, I mentioned the various fungal markers. Markers 2, 4, and 5, and 6 are linked to Aspergillus mold exposure, gut colonization from those markers, or from mold, excuse me. Arabinose being linked to candidiasis, or generalized candida in the gut. And then one of the things that's important to understand is that oxalic acid in this particular child was very high. Now we can get high oxalates by just consuming high oxalate food, but it's important also to understand that oxalic acid anymore is also being looked at as a marker that could be coming from fungus production. So it turns out that candida and aspergillus can actually produce oxalate. So on the right, we see an image here where candida has a specific enzyme called isocitrate lyase that will take a specific chemical from the Krebs cycle and convert it to oxalic acid. And then aspergillus can also produce high oxalate. So it's important to understand that not only can high oxalate occur through diet, but it can also occur through fungus production within the digestive system. So the organic acid test on page 3 contains many markers that are linked to mitochondrial imbalance. So in this particular case, we see a high normal lactic acid. Lactic acid can be elevated for multiple reasons. In the part 1 video in this discussion, I mentioned how high lactic acid could occur in somebody with mycotoxin exposure. There are other reasons too, but mycotoxin exposure could lead to it. And then we see elevated succinic, fumaric, malic, citric acid. A couple things with regards to those specific markers. Those are linked specifically to chemistry with what's called the Krebs cycle. Now, the Krebs cycle is this biochemical system that manifests or occurs within the mitochondria. So the mitochondria are these energy factories within our cells, the high metabolic organ systems of our body, our brain nervous system, cardiovascular system, musculoskeletal system. You know, the cells in those organ systems contain thousands of mitochondria, which means those cells and the mitochondria in those cells are producing a lot of cellular energy currency. The chemical and cellular energy currency is a chemical called ATP. And in order to get ATP production from mitochondria, there's a lot of chemical sequencing that has to take place. And so if there are imbalances happening within the mitochondria, it can often be expressed on the organic acid test. So the Krebs cycle is a key component of that. And so through the organic acid test, we can get an idea of certain areas within the mitochondria that can become compromised. Now, the organic acid test also contains neurotransmitter metabolites. And what's interesting in this particular child is that the neurotransmitter metabolites, for the most part, are normal. And that's not typical of most individuals with autism or other special needs conditions. Often there are imbalances where things might be high or low. The only thing that we see elevated in this particular case is marker 40, a compound called kynureninic. And there's multiple reasons that that can be elevated, but in this particular case, the most likely reason that marker is just mildly high is because of an additional need for vitamin B6. And so that marker can be elevated when there is a B6 need in the body. So there are other reasons, but that's a common one. Now, what is absolutely abnormal in this particular individual are the ketone and fatty acid oxidation markers. There's a lot of chemistry involved in this. There's multiple reasons why some of these markers can be high, but 4344 can be elevated in somebody who's on a ketogenic diet. It's always important to sort of ask that question, if you're a practitioner listening to this. So those two markers can be elevated because of just dietary changes. Sometimes they can be elevated in somebody who has metabolic syndrome or developing insulin resistance. So those things have to be taken into consideration too. 45 through 49, those markers are often elevated when there's oxidative stress reactions happening within the mitochondria. They can also be elevated when we don't have enough carnitine. Carnitine is a very important nutrient chemical in our body that helps to transport certain fats into the cell, into the mitochondria, to then be used as a fuel source. So if there is a carnitine deficiency, those markers can be elevated as well. And then there are a number of nutritional markers on the organic acid test. I'm just going to focus on one, and that is the elevated marker you see for marker 55. That's called 3-hydroxy-3-methylglutaric. And you'll notice the marker is elevated at 134. It has an asterisk next to it. The asterisk indicates that the marker itself is an indirect reflection of CoQ10 deficiency. So this individual has a CoQ10 deficiency. Why is that significant? Well, it turns out that CoQ10 is an integral nutrient within our mitochondria, specifically what's called the electron transport chain, where we have these different proteins that are transporting electrons down this chain reaction, the end result being the production of ATP, that cellular energy currency. And if we don't have enough CoQ10, we're not going to get enough electron transfer. And when we don't get enough electron transfer happening between the different proteins, those electrons can end up leaking into the matrix, the innermost part of the mitochondria, and generate reactive oxygen species or free radicals. And those free radicals can then have a damaging effect within the mitochondria. So even just a CoQ10 deficiency could be a major contributing factor to mitochondrial dysfunction. The other thing that is abnormal in this particular organic acid test are all of the markers in the indicators of detoxification section. Now I'm just going to mention two. That is marker 58 and 59. Marker 58, pyroglutamic, notice it has an asterisk next to it. 59 does as well. When pyroglutamic is elevated, it indicates a glutathione deficiency. When marker 59 is elevated, it indicates an increased demand within the body to try to produce or maintain glutathione levels. And the question to always ask when these markers are elevated is, why are they elevated? Well, this particular individual has a lot of fungal exposures, particularly the mold exposure. There is bacterial overgrowth. There's high oxalate, for example. It's certainly reasonable to consider that there may be some mycotoxins that the person has been exposed to, or just the total load of all of the different imbalances could be putting a strain on the glutathione system. So, and that certainly seems to be the case happening in this particular situation. So If you are interested in learning more about this particular organic acid test, this is part. I have a Substack. You can go to drwiller.substack.com. I have a multiple part series of articles outlining this organic acid test, and I have a lot of other information on my Substack as well. So you're welcome to join my Substack to follow me, not only for past information that I've done, but future information that I'll be providing moving forward. If you're interested in our consulting practice, you can go to our website at mysunrisecenter.com. Our email is scmedicalcenter@gmail.com, and you see the phone number listed there as well. So again, I'm Dr. Kurt Wohler for Sunrise Functional Medicine. Thanks so much.